The massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber slid open with a soft hiss, and Ambassador Jake Morrison walked inside with steady steps. His black uniform bore the simple Earth symbol on the chest, nothing fancy or decorated like the colorful robes worn by alien delegates around the curved room. Behind him walked 23 humans, each one carrying a small photo in their hands. Jake had been Earth's voice in this chamber for 12 years now. He had sat through thousands of meetings, listened to endless debates, and watched his people die for causes that were never truly their own. Today would be different. Today would be the last time he would stand before these beings who called themselves the rulers of the galaxy. The chamber held representatives from 47 different worlds. The tall blue Altarians sat in their crystal chairs, their large eyes reflecting the light from above. The small gray Vegans huddled together in their section, their thin fingers always moving as they took notes on everything. The massive Centaurians filled their reinforced seats, their thick arms crossed as they watched the humans enter. But it was the Zephyrians who drew Jake's attention. Counselor Vextar floated in his energy field, his transparent body shimmering as he moved. This creature had been the voice of the Council for over 50 years. He had seen empires rise and fall, had witnessed wars that destroyed entire star systems, and had always maintained that the Council knew what was best for everyone. "The human delegation may approach," Vexitar announced, his voice echoing through translation devices that made it sound cold and mechanical. Jake walked forward, until he reached the center of the chamber. The humans behind him arranged themselves in a line, each one holding their photo up so the alien delegates could see. These were pictures of sons and daughters, brothers and sisters, mothers and fathers who had died in the last battle at Proxima. "Centauri." "Honored Council," Jake began, his voice carrying clearly through the vast space. 3 weeks ago you asked humanity to stop the Scourge invasion of the Zephyrian colonies. You told us that 3 billion lives hung in the balance. You said that only human forces could move fast enough to prevent a massacre. He paused and looked around the chamber. Every alien eye was on him, but he could read nothing in their strange faces. They showed no emotion, no understanding of what was coming. "We did as you asked," Jake continued. "The Terran Defense Fleet responded within 6 hours. Admiral Lisa Brooks led our fastest ships across 200 light-years of space. They arrived just as the Scourge was beginning their final assault on New Zephyria." In the observation deck above, Admiral Brooks herself watched the proceedings. She had commanded the human fleet for 15 years, had led them through battles that would have been impossible for any other species to win. Her ships were faster than Altarian cruisers, tougher than Centaurian battleships, and more flexible than anything the Vegans had ever built. But speed and strength meant nothing if you were not willing to sacrifice everything for strangers, the Sith. "Battle lasted 4 days," Jake said, his voice growing quieter. "The Scourge had prepared for months. They had weapons we had never seen before, ships that could phase through normal matter, creatures that could survive in space without protection. Our sensors showed over 2 million enemy vessels waiting in the outer system." He gestured to the humans behind him. "These people lost family members in that battle. Lieutenant Danny Cooper was 22 years old when his fighter was destroyed, protecting a Zephyrian transport. Sergeant Mary Johnson died when she stayed behind to hold a boarding tunnel so civilians could escape. Captain Steve Williams gave his life to ram his damaged cruiser into a Scourge command ship." The chamber remained silent. No alien delegate spoke or moved. They had heard such reports before. Human casualties were simply numbers in their records, acceptable losses in the greater scheme of galactic peace. 20,000 humans died at Proxima Centauri, Jake said, his voice now barely above a whisper. 20,000 of our people gave their lives to save Zephyrian colonies. And when the battle was over, when the Scourge was defeated and 3 billion Zephyrians were safe, you know what happened next. Vextar shifted in his energy field. He knew what was coming, but protocol demanded that the human be allowed to finish his statement. The council met in emergency session. Jake continued. You debated for 6 hours about what reward to give humanity for this latest sacrifice. Some of you suggested a formal thanks. Others proposed a small increase in our trade agreements. But in the end, you decided that our request for voting rights in this council was still premature. Now Jake's voice grew stronger, filled with an anger that had been building for 30 years. You decided that humans are too young, too reckless, too emotional to have a real voice in galactic affairs. You decided that we should be grateful for the privilege of dying for species that consider us little more than useful animals. Admiral Brooks felt her hands clench into fists as she watched from above. She had been in the chamber that day, had listened as alien delegate after alien delegate explained why humanity was not ready for true partnership. They spoke of human aggression, of their short lifespans, of their tendency to make decisions based on emotion rather than logic. None of them mentioned that human aggression had saved them countless times. None of them cared that human emotions included compassion for strangers, willingness to sacrifice for others, and the ability to see worth in species that were completely different from themselves. For 30 years, Jake said, his voice now carrying across the entire chamber, humanity has served this council. We have fought your wars, protected your colonies, saved your people from disasters, both natural and artificial. We have asked for only one thing in return: recognition as equals. He looked directly at Vextar. Today, that ends. A ripple of movement went through the alien delegates. The Altarians leaned forward in their seats. The Vegans stopped taking notes. The Centaurians uncrossed their arms. Even the floating Zephyrians seemed to waver in their energy fields. For 30 years, Jake repeated, we have bled for worlds that are not ours, protected species that will not even acknowledge our right to exist as equals among the stars. We have been your soldiers, your emergency response team, your solution to every crisis that your own forces cannot handle. Behind him, the 23 humans continued to hold their photos. These were not professional diplomats or trained speakers. These were ordinary people who had lost family members to alien wars, alien emergencies, alien problems that somehow always required human sacrifice to solve. We have given you our best ships, Jake said. We have given you our brightest minds. We have given you our strongest soldiers. We have given you our blood, our lives, our future. And what have you given us in return? The silence in the chamber was complete now. No alien moved or spoke. They all knew the answer to his question. Nothing, Jake said simply. You have given us nothing but condescension, dismissal, and the expectation that we should be grateful for the chance to die for you. Vextar finally spoke, his translated voice still cold and mechanical. Ambassador Morrison, humanity's contributions to galactic peace are appreciated by all council members. However, the question of voting rights requires careful consideration of many factors. No, Jake interrupted, and his single word seemed to echo through the chamber like a gunshot. No more excuses, no more delays, no more promises that maybe someday you will treat us as equals. He turned to face the entire council, his eyes moving from one section to another, meeting the gaze of every alien delegate who would look at him. "Effective immediately," he announced. "All human military assets are withdrawing from Council space. All human personnel are returning to Earth and our colonies. All human research facilities are shutting down their joint programs. All human diplomatic missions are closing." Now the chamber erupted. Alien voices rose in protest, translation devices struggling to keep up with dozens of different languages all speaking at once. The Altarians stood up from their crystal chairs. The Vegans began frantically typing on their devices. The Centaurians slammed their massive fists on their table surfaces. Through it all, Vextar remained floating in his energy field, but even his transparent form seemed to have lost some of its shimmer. "You cannot do this," he said, his mechanical voice cutting through the noise. "Humanity has obligations, treaties, agreements, all of which are hereby terminated," Jake replied calmly. "We are going home, Counselor. We are going home, and we are not coming back." He turned and began walking toward the exit, the 23 humans falling into step behind him. Their photos were still visible, still showing the faces of those who had died for alien causes. "This is impossible," Vextar called after them. "The Council will not accept this withdrawal. There are procedures, protocols." Jake stopped at the chamber doors and looked back one last time. "For 30 years we followed your procedures and protocols. We died by your rules and served your interests. And what did it get us? Nothing but the privilege of dying for people who think we are not good enough to sit at their table." The doors slid open, and Jake Morrison walked out of the Galactic Council chamber for the last time. Captain Ryan Walsh was sitting in his command chair aboard the battlecruiser Earth's Fury when the message arrived. The ship was positioned in orbit around Kepler 442b, a mining world on the edge of Council space where raiders had been causing trouble for the past 3 months. His crew had been fighting off attacks almost daily, protecting cargo ships and mining platforms from pirates who thought the remote location made them safe from retaliation. The communication console beeped, and Lieutenant Karen Hayes turned to face him. "Captain, we're receiving a priority message from Fleet Command. It's marked urgent and eyes only." Ryan stood up and walked to his private terminal. The message was short, just 3 lines of text, but each word hit him like a physical blow. "Operation Homecoming authorized. All Terran Defense Fleet units return to Sol system immediately. No exceptions." He read it twice, then a third time, trying to understand what he was seeing. Operation Homecoming was a theoretical plan that had been developed years ago but never implemented. It was the complete withdrawal of all human forces from Council space, something that military planners had created as a worst-case scenario that they never expected to actually use. "Lieutenant Hayes," he called out, "signal the fleet. All ships are to prepare for immediate departure." Karen looked confused. "Sir, what about the mining operation?" "The next convoy is scheduled to arrive in 6 hours, and intelligence shows at least 12 raider ships in the outer system." Ryan looked at the tactical display showing the positions of his ships. The Earth's Fury was the largest vessel in the small fleet, but she was supported by 3 destroyers, 8 frigates, and a dozen smaller patrol craft. Together, they had been keeping this entire sector safe for months. "New orders from Earth," he said simply. "We're going home." Across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out on hundreds of human ships. Captain Linda Foster received the same message while her destroyer was escorting a diplomatic convoy between Vega and Altair. She read the orders, looked at the alien, diplomats in the passenger compartments who were depending on her protection, and gave the command to turn around. Commander Alex Torres got the message while his Marines were conducting joint training exercises with Centaurian forces on Proxima. Station. He called his troops back to their transport ship, ignoring the confused questions from their alien counterparts who did not understand why the humans were suddenly packing their equipment and leaving. On the research station orbiting Tau Ceti, Dr. Susan Parker was working late in her laboratory when her personal communicator chimed. She had been collaborating with alien scientists for 15 years, developing medical treatments that had saved millions of lives across dozens of different species. Her work on cross-species infection control had prevented 3 major pandemics in the last decade alone. The message she received was different from the military recall, but the meaning was the same. All human civilian personnel were to return to Earth immediately. All research projects were to be terminated. All data was to be secured or destroyed to prevent unauthorized access. Susan looked around her laboratory, seeing 15 years of her life's work spread across tables and computer screens. In one corner sat a prototype medical scanner that could detect diseases in any known species. On her main computer were the complete genetic sequences of over 200 alien pathogens, along with treatment protocols that she had developed through years of careful testing. Her research partner, Dr. Kethmore, entered the laboratory carrying 2 cups of Altarian tea as he did every evening. The tall blue alien had worked alongside Susan since she first arrived at the station, and together they had published over 60 papers that had revolutionized galactic medicine. "Susan," he said in his careful English, "I brought your tea. Are you ready to review the data from today's experiments?" She looked at him for a long moment, this alien who had become her closest friend and collaborator. They had spent countless hours together, working through problems that had challenged both human and Altarian medicine. He had taught her to see diseases the way his species did, as complex puzzles that could be solved through patience and logic. She had shown him the human approach of intuitive leaps and creative solutions that sometimes broke all the rules, but somehow worked. "Kethmore," she said quietly, "I have to leave." He set down the teacups and looked at her with those large silver eyes that showed emotion so clearly. "Leave? But we are so close to completing the universal vaccine project. In another month, we will have a treatment that can prevent the red fever in all known species." Susan turned to her computer and began typing commands. Files disappeared from the screen one by one as she deleted years of research. The Universal Vaccine Project vanished. The cross-species medical database was wiped clean. Treatment protocols that had taken months to develop were erased in seconds. "Susan, what are you doing?" Kethmore asked, his voice rising with alarm. "That research could save millions of lives." "I know," she said, continuing to type. "But apparently my species is not considered worthy of equal treatment by the Council. If they don't value human contributions enough to give us a voice in galactic affairs, then they don't deserve to benefit from human knowledge." She finished deleting her files and turned to face her alien friend. "For 15 years, I have worked with Council scientists. I have shared human medical knowledge freely, helped develop treatments for alien diseases, trained doctors from dozens of different worlds. And what has humanity received in return?" Kethmore was silent, knowing the answer as well as she did. "Nothing," Susan continued. "We are still considered too primitive, too emotional, too young to have a real say in how the galaxy is governed." "Well, if that's how the Council feels, then the Council can solve its medical problems without human help." She walked to her personal quarters and began packing her belongings. Behind her, Kethmore stood in the laboratory, staring at the blank computer screens that had once contained knowledge that could have changed the galaxy. Similar scenes were playing out across Council space. On the Joint Military Academy at Proxima Station, human instructors were packing their belongings and preparing to leave. These humans had been training alien cadets for over a decade, teaching them tactics and strategies that had proven successful in countless battles. Captain Dan Miller was the senior human instructor at the academy. He had trained over 3,000 alien officers during his time there, including many who now commanded their own ships and led their own fleets. As he packed his office, young cadets kept appearing at his door with confused and desperate questions. "Sir," said Cadet Zarthan, a young Centaurian who had been one of Dan's best students, "where are you going? We have the final tactical examination next week." Dan looked at the massive alien, remembering the day Zarthan had first arrived at the academy. The young Centaurian had been arrogant and dismissive, convinced that his species' strength made him superior to any human instructor. It had taken months of patient training to show him that tactics and strategy mattered more than raw power, that sometimes the smallest move could determine the outcome of the largest battle. "The examination is canceled," Dan said simply. "All human instructors are returning to Earth." "But why?" Zarthan asked. "Did we do something wrong? Did we fail to meet your standards?" Dan paused in his packing and looked at the young alien. "No, Cadet. You and your classmates have performed admirably, but your governments have decided that humans are not worthy of equal treatment in the Council. If that's how they feel, then humans will no longer contribute to Council military training." He finished packing and headed for the door. Behind him, Zarthan and a dozen other alien cadets watched their human instructors walk away, taking with them decades of knowledge and experience that could not be replaced. On Earth, the news of the withdrawal was met with mixed reactions. Some humans were angry that it had taken so long. Others worried about the consequences of cutting ties with the galactic community. But most were simply tired of watching their friends and family die for aliens who would never accept them as equals. President Karen Davis stood in the Oval Office, watching news reports of human ships returning from across the galaxy. Fleet Admiral Lisa Brooks stood beside her, monitoring the progress of Operation Homecoming through her portable communication device. "How many ships are we bringing back?" the president asked. "All of them," Lisa replied. "Every human vessel in Council space is returning to Sol. That's over 800 military ships, 300 research vessels, and nearly 1,000 civilian transports. The largest fleet movement in human history." The president nodded, but her expression remained serious. "And the diplomatic consequences?" "The Council is trying to contact us through every channel they have," Lisa said. 17 different species have sent emergency messages demanding explanations. The Zephyrians are claiming that our withdrawal violates treaty obligations. The Altarians are threatening economic sanctions. "Are they now?" the president said with a bitter smile. "They're threatening us. After 30 years of human blood spilled for their causes, they're making threats." She turned away from the window and faced the admiral. "What's our response?" "Radio silence," Lisa said. 3 months had passed since the last human ship disappeared from Council space, and the galaxy was beginning to understand what they had lost. The first real test came in the Outer Rim territories, where a militant group called the Hegemony had been kept in check by human peacekeeping forces for over 20 years. Fleet Admiral Zix Thara of the Altarian Navy stood in the command center of his flagship, the Crystal Dawn, reviewing intelligence reports that made his stomach turn. The Hegemony had spent months preparing for this moment, building a massive fleet in the dark spaces between stars where Council sensors could not detect them. "Sir," reported his tactical officer. "We have confirmed sightings of hegemony forces in 12 different systems. They appear to be moving in coordinated attack formations." Zixthara studied the holographic display showing enemy positions. Red dots marked hegemony ships, while blue dots showed council forces. Even at first glance, the numbers looked bad. The hegemony had at least 3,000 ships spread across their attack zones, while the council could only muster about half that number. But numbers had never been the real problem. The council had always possessed superior technology, better shields, more powerful weapons. What they had relied on humans for was something else entirely, something that Zixthara was only now beginning to understand. "Signal the fleet," he ordered. "All ships are to proceed to Rigel 7. We will make our stand there and show these hegemony terrorists what happens when they challenge the council." The Battle of Rigel 7 would become known as one of the greatest military disasters in council history. Admiral Zixthara approached the enemy with textbook precision, his ships arranged in perfect formation, his attack plan following strategies that had been taught in military academies for centuries. The hegemony fleet was waiting for them in orbit around Rigel 7, a small colony world with about 2 million inhabitants. Their ships were older, models, many of them outdated designs that should have been no match for modern council vessels. On paper, it should have been an easy victory. The battle began exactly as Zixthara had planned. His heavy cruisers opened fire from maximum range, their energy weapons cutting through space toward the enemy formation. The hegemony ships responded with their own weapons, but their firepower was clearly inferior. Everything was going according to plan. Then the hegemony did something that was not in any military textbook. Instead of maintaining their formation and trading shots like civilized warships, they broke apart into small groups and began moving in seemingly random patterns. Some ships dove toward the planet, using its gravity well to accelerate beyond normal limits. Others spread out in wide arcs, approaching the council fleet from unexpected angles. "Sir," called the tactical officer, "the enemy formation is breaking up. They're not following any recognizable attack pattern." Zixthara frowned at the display. In all his years of military service, he had never seen such chaotic behavior from an enemy fleet. It was completely unprofessional, totally against every principle of space warfare he had ever learned. "Maintain formation," he ordered. "Continue the attack as planned. They cannot maintain this disorder for long." But the hegemony could maintain it, and they did. Their ships moved like a swarm of angry insects, darting in and out of the council formation, striking at weak points and disappearing before the heavier council ships could respond. They used the planet's gravity, the local asteroid field, even the radiation from the nearby star to mask their movements and confuse council sensors. Within 2 hours, the Crystal Dawn was the only council ship still fighting. Around her, the wreckage of 17 other vessels drifted in the darkness, their crews dead or captured. The hegemony had lost only 3 ships in the entire battle. "How is this possible?" Zixthara whispered, staring at the tactical display that showed his fleet's destruction. "We had superior firepower, better shields, more advanced technology." His tactical officer, one of the few crew members still alive, looked up from his damaged console. "Sir, they fought like humans." Back on Earth, General Pete Johnson watched recordings of the battle in his office at Luna Command. The images were grainy, taken from long-range sensors, but they told a clear story. The Council fleet had fought with precision and discipline, following every rule of military engagement. The hegemony had fought with creativity and chaos, adapting to every situation and finding solutions that no textbook had ever considered. "They're trying to copy our tactics," he said to his aide, Major Carol White. "But they don't understand the thinking behind them." Carol nodded as she watched hegemony ships perform maneuvers that would have made human pilots proud. "It's like watching someone try to speak a language they've only heard but never learned. They have the words, but not the meaning." General Johnson had spent 30 years fighting alongside alien forces, trying to teach them the principles that made human military doctrine so effective. Flexibility, improvisation, the willingness to break rules when the situation demanded it. Most alien species could learn the tactics, but few could truly understand the mindset that created them. The problem, he explained to Carol, is that most alien cultures value order and predictability. They fight wars the same way they organize their societies, with clear hierarchies and established procedures. Humans fight wars the way we live our lives, adapting to whatever comes and finding solutions that nobody expected. The defeat at Rigel 7 was just the beginning. Within weeks, hegemony forces had overrun 6 more star systems, capturing key industrial worlds and strategic positions that the Council had thought were impregnable. Each battle followed the same pattern. Council forces would attack with superior technology and careful planning, only to be overwhelmed by unconventional tactics that they could not counter. On the medical front, the absence of human doctors and researchers was becoming equally apparent. Dr. Mitchell Brown, formerly of the Galactic Disease Control Center, sat in his new office on Luna Colony, watching news reports of a plague outbreak on Vega Prime. The disease was called Crimson Wasting, a virus that attacked the nervous systems of multiple alien species. It had appeared on Vega Prime 3 weeks ago and was now spreading rapidly through the planet's population centers. The local medical authorities were applying standard treatments, following protocols that had been established decades earlier. Mitchell recognized the symptoms immediately. He had dealt with a similar outbreak 5 years ago on a mining colony near Proxima Centauri. The solution had required combining human medical intuition with Altarian biotechnology, creating a treatment that violated several established medical protocols but worked when nothing else did. "The cure is sitting right there," he said to his research assistant, Dr. Helen Park. "I could have that plague stopped in 2 weeks, maybe less." Helen looked at the reports on their shared screen. "Will you contact them? Offer to help?" Mitchell was quiet for a long moment, remembering the years he had spent training alien doctors, sharing human medical knowledge, working 18-hour days to save lives on worlds he had never even visited. "No," he said finally. "They made it clear that human contributions were not valued. If they want our help now, they can ask for it properly." But no requests for help came. The Council's pride would not allow them to admit that they needed the humans they had dismissed as too primitive to deserve equal treatment. Instead, they struggled with problems that human experts could have solved easily, watching their people die from diseases that human medicine had already conquered. On the trading world of New Geneva, Governor Thaxon received reports that made his scales turn pale with fear. The hegemony fleet that had destroyed Admiral Zixathara was now heading toward his system, and the nearest Council reinforcements were still days away. "Send an emergency transmission," he ordered his communications officer. "Contact any human, vessels in the area. Offer them anything they want. Just get them here before the hegemony arrives." The transmission went out on all frequencies, but only silence came back. Human ships had passed through the system regularly for 20 years, protecting trade routes and maintaining order. Now there were none to be found, as if they had never existed. Thaxon tried again, this time broadcasting on the old emergency, frequencies that humans had established during the early days of Council cooperation. This is New Geneva Colony requesting immediate assistance. Civilian population under attack. Please respond. Please. The message reached human monitoring stations scattered throughout their territories, including the main listening post on Titan. Lieutenant Dave Carter received the transmission and immediately forwarded it to his commanding officer, Captain Lisa Kim. "Sir," he reported, "we're getting distress calls from 17 different council worlds. They're all requesting military assistance against hegemony forces." Captain Kim read through the messages, recognizing the desperation in each one. These were the same worlds that had benefited from human protection for decades, the same governments that had voted against giving humanity equal representation in the Council. "Any response ordered from command?" she asked. Dave checked his computer. "Standing orders are to monitor all transmissions but provide no assistance. Radio silence is to be maintained with all Council forces and territories." 6 months had passed since humanity's withdrawal, and the Galactic Council was facing the worst crisis in its 10,000-year history. The emergency session chamber on Galactic Prime was only half full now, as dozens of member species had withdrawn, their support for a government that could no longer protect them. Counselor Vextar floated alone at the center of the chamber, his transparent form seeming dimmer than before. Around him, the remaining delegates sat in small groups, their alien faces showing the strain of constant crisis. The mighty council that had once commanded the loyalty of thousands of worlds now struggled to maintain control over even its core territories. "The latest reports from the Outer Rim," Vexitar began, his mechanical voice echoing in the half-empty chamber. "The hegemony now controls 43 star systems. Their forces continue to advance toward the core worlds at a rate that our remaining fleets cannot match." Counselor Melandra of the Centaurian Republic stood up, her massive form towering over the other delegates. 43 systems in 6 months. At this rate, they will reach Altair Prime within a year. We cannot continue to pretend that conventional tactics will save us. The Vegan delegate, Counselor Silmar, raised one thin hand. "Our analysis indicates that hegemony forces are using modified versions of human military doctrine. They have studied human tactics for years and adapted them for their own use. Without humans to counter these strategies, our forces are at a severe disadvantage." "Then we must contact the humans," Melandra declared, her voice booming through the chamber. "Our pride has cost us everything. We must ask for their help." The chamber fell silent. For 20 minutes, not one delegate spoke. The idea of appealing to humanity, of admitting that they needed the species they had dismissed as too primitive for equal treatment, was almost unthinkable. Finally, Vextar spoke. "The Council has stood for 10,000 years without human assistance. We will not grovel before these upstart newcomers simply because we face a temporary setback." "Temporary?" Melandra's voice rose with anger. "Counselor, we have lost nearly half our territory. Our fleets are in retreat across 3 sectors. Our member worlds are abandoning us daily. In what way is this temporary?" But even as she spoke, Melandra knew that Vextar's position was shared by many of the remaining delegates. The older species, those that had dominated the Council for millennia, could not accept that they might need help from humans who had been exploring space for less than 2 centuries. On the distant mining world of Kepler 442b, Governor Thaxon watched hegemony raiders destroy his orbital defense platforms through his office window. The attack had been going on for 6 hours, and his security forces were completely overwhelmed. Thaxon remembered the last time raiders had threatened his world just 8 months ago, Captain Ryan Walsh and his battlecruiser Earth's Fury had arrived within hours of his distress call, driving off the attackers with such efficiency that the mining operation had barely been interrupted. Now there was no Earth's Fury coming to save them. No human ships patrolled the trade routes. No human marines stood ready to defend civilian installations against attack. Thaxon activated his emergency communicator and began broadcasting on the old human frequencies. "This is Kepler 442b requesting immediate assistance. Civilian population under attack. Mining facilities being destroyed. Please respond, please." The message reached human monitoring stations throughout Sol System, where it was recorded and filed along with hundreds of similar pleas that arrived every day. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell read the transcript in her office on Europa Station, recognizing the desperation in every word. "Another one," she said to her aide. "Ensign Mark Taylor. That's the 15th distress call this week from Council territories." Mark looked at the message. "Do we respond, ma'am?" Sarah shook her head. "Standing orders are clear. Monitor only, no assistance. The Council wanted us gone, and we're gone." But the decision still bothered her. Sarah had served aboard ships that protected worlds like Kepler 442b for over a decade. She knew Governor Thaxon personally, had shared meals with him during diplomatic visits, had met his family. The idea of leaving him and his people to face the raiders alone went against every instinct she had developed during her years in space. "Ma'am," Mark said quietly. "Permission to speak freely?" Sarah nodded. "Is this what we've become? Are we really going to sit here and listen to people die when we could help them?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment, thinking about the question that haunted every human who monitored the Council communications. "Mark, for 30 years we did help them. We bled for them, died for them, sacrificed everything for species that would never accept us as equals. And what did we get for it?" "Nothing," Mark admitted. "That's right. Nothing. No respect, no recognition, no voice in the decisions that sent our people to die. So now they can learn to solve their own problems." The conversation was being repeated in human facilities across Sol System, as military, personnel, and civilians alike struggled with watching the galaxy tear itself apart. But orders were orders, and humanity had finally learned the cost of caring for those who did not care in return. On the research station at Tau Ceti, Dr. Kethmore worked alone in his laboratory, trying to continue the medical research that he and Dr. Susan Parker had begun together. The Universal Vaccine Project had been his life's work, a treatment that could prevent the red fever plague in all known species. Without Susan's human intuition and creative problem-solving, the work moved at a fraction of its former pace. Kethmore could follow established procedures and run standard tests, but the breakthrough insights that had driven their research forward always seemed to come from his human partner. The red fever was spreading again, appearing on 17 different worlds in the past month. The standard treatments were proving ineffective against this new strain, and Altarian medical authorities were beginning to panic as the death toll mounted. Kethmore stared at his computer screen, looking at data that should have provided answers but instead only raised more questions. He knew that Susan would have seen the pattern immediately, would have recognized the subtle connections between different test results that pointed toward a solution. He activated his communication system and began composing a message to Earth, then stopped. What could he say? That he needed her help? That Altarian medicine was not sufficient to solve problems that required human creativity? That his people were dying because they had been too proud to treat their human partners as equals? He deleted the message without sending it and returned to his work, knowing that thousands would die while he struggled to find answers that Susan Parker could have provided in a matter of hours. The crisis was not limited to military and medical problems. The galactic economy was beginning to collapse as trade routes went unprotected and commercial vessels fell prey to pirates and raiders. Human merchant marines had protected interstellar commerce for decades, their fast ships and aggressive tactics keeping the space lanes safe for alien traders. On the commercial hub world of New Prosperity, Trade Minister Kovacs watched cargo. Ship arrivals dropped to less than 20% of normal levels. Insurance rates for interstellar shipping had increased by over 400% in just 6 months, making trade unprofitable for all but the most essential goods. We have requests for protection from over 300 commercial convoys, his aide reported, but our escort fleets are already overextended. We can provide security for perhaps 50 vessels per month. Kovacs looked at the economic projections on his screen. At the current rate of decline, the Council's interstellar economy would collapse completely within 2 years. Worlds that depended on imported food and materials would face starvation and industrial shutdown. Contact the human trade representatives, he ordered. Offer them exclusive trading rights, reduced tariffs, whatever they want. We need their merchant protection services. His aide hesitated. Sir, there are no human trade representatives. They all returned to Earth 6 months ago. We have no way to contact them through official channels. Kovacs stared at his aide, suddenly, realizing the full scope of humanity's withdrawal. They had not simply removed their military forces and research personnel. They had severed every tie, closed every communication channel, and withdrawn completely from galactic civilization. The Council had lost not just their protectors, but their partners in every aspect of interstellar society. On Earth, President Karen Davis sat in the Oval Office, reading reports from intelligence agencies that monitored Council space. The news was uniformly grim. Military defeats, economic collapse, social unrest, and the breakdown of the governmental system that had maintained galactic peace for millennia. How many requests for communication have we received? She asked Admiral Lisa Brooks, who had become her primary advisor on galactic affairs. Over 2,000, Lisa replied. Everything from military pleas for assistance to economic partnership proposals to formal diplomatic overtures. Some council members are offering us permanent seats on their governing bodies, exclusive trade agreements, even territorial concessions. The president nodded grimly. And our response? Complete silence, as ordered. No human official has acknowledged any council communication. As far as they know, we might as well have vanished from the galaxy entirely. 2 years had passed since humanity's withdrawal from the galactic community, and the universe seemed to have forgotten that humans had ever existed. The great star maps in Council archives no longer showed Earth or any human colonies as active civilizations. Trade routes that had connected Sol system to the galaxy for generations were marked as closed or abandoned. To most alien species, humanity had become nothing more than a memory of a time when the galaxy had been safer and more prosperous. But humanity had not been idle during their silence. Dr. Helen Park stood in the observation deck of New Geneva Station, watching the completion of humanity's greatest engineering project. The massive space station orbited Earth's moon, its construction hidden from alien sensors by technology that made human ships invisible to outside detection. Around the station, hundreds of vessels moved in perfect coordination, ships that incorporated advances in faster-than-light travel that surpassed anything the Council had ever imagined. "The new drive systems are performing beyond expectations," reported Chief Engineer Robert Kim as he joined Helen at the observation window. "We can now travel between star systems in hours instead of days. Our exploration fleets have mapped over 200 new worlds in the past year alone." Helen nodded, watching a sleek destroyer emerge from the station's construction bay. The ship's hull incorporated alien technologies that human scientists had studied and improved upon during their years of cooperation with Council species. But the improvements were purely human, innovations that alien minds had never considered, because they required the kind of creative thinking that only humans seem to possess. "Any word from the outer colonies?" she asked. "New Terra reports that their terraforming project is ahead of schedule," Robert replied. "They expect to have a fully habitable world within 5 years. The mining operations on Kepler 438b are producing materials we've never seen before, and the research facility at Wolf 359 has made breakthrough discoveries in quantum physics that could revolutionize interstellar travel." Humanity had not simply withdrawn from the galaxy. They had turned inward and focused all their energy on advancing their own civilization. Without the constant demands of alien emergencies and council obligations, human scientists and engineers had made progress at a rate that astonished even themselves. On Earth, President Karen Davis was serving, her second term in an office that had been transformed by humanity's isolation. The daily reports that crossed her desk no longer contained urgent requests for military intervention in alien wars or pleas for assistance with galactic crises. Instead, they detailed the steady expansion of human territory, the development of new technologies, and the growth of colonies that were completely independent of alien influence. "The monthly intelligence report from the Council territories," announced her aide, bringing in a thick folder of documents. "It makes for interesting reading." Davis opened the folder and began scanning the reports. The hegemony now controlled over 60% of what had once been Council space. The remaining Council forces were trapped in a defensive perimeter around their core worlds, fighting a desperate battle against an enemy that used human tactics better than the humans themselves ever had. "Casualties?" she asked. "Conservative. Estimates put the death toll at over 50 million across all species," her aide replied. "Most of them civilians caught in the fighting or killed by diseases that the Council medical system can no longer treat effectively." Davis closed the folder and leaned back in her chair. 50 million deaths in 2 years, and every one of them could have been prevented if humanity had remained part of the galactic community. But the cost of that prevention would have been the continued subjugation of her species, the perpetual denial of human rights and dignity by aliens who viewed them as useful tools rather than equal partners. "Any communication attempts?" she asked. "Over 5,000 in the past month alone. Everything from formal diplomatic overtures to personal pleas from individuals we worked with for decades. The most recent came from Counselor Mel Andra herself, offering humanity permanent voting rights on the Council in exchange for military assistance." "Too little, too late," Davis said simply. "They had 30 years to offer us equal treatment. They chose not to. Now they can live with the consequences." But, even as she spoke, Davis felt the weight of those 50 million deaths. Each report detailed worlds falling to chaos, species facing extinction, civilizations that had existed for millennia crumbling under the pressure of conflicts they could not resolve without human assistance. In the outer territories of human space, Admiral Lisa Brooks commanded a fleet that had grown far beyond anything the old Terran Defense Fleet had ever imagined. The ships under her command were faster, stronger, and more advanced than any vessels in the galaxy. Her crews were trained to standards that surpassed even the elite forces that had once served the Council. "Admiral," reported her communications. "Officer, we're receiving another distress signal from Council Space. The Vegan homeworld is under direct attack by hegemony forces." Lisa looked at the tactical display showing hegemony positions throughout the galaxy. The green dots representing human ships were clustered around Sol System and the new colonies, while the red dots of enemy forces covered nearly 2/3 of the map. "Acknowledged," she said. "Continue monitoring but do not respond." The communications officer hesitated. "Ma'am, intelligence estimates indicate that over 2 billion Vegans will die if their homeworld falls." Lisa was quiet for a moment, remembering the years she had spent working alongside Vegan officers, training them, fighting beside them, watching them struggle with military concepts that came naturally to humans. They had been good allies, even if their government had never treated humanity as an equal partner. "Maintain radio silence," she ordered. "Those are our standing orders, and they remain in effect." The officer nodded and returned to his station, but Lisa could see the doubt in his eyes. This was the dilemma that faced every human military commander. They had the power to stop the galactic crisis, but doing so would validate the Council's treatment of humanity as a tool to be used rather than a people to be respected. On the research, Vessel Discovery, Dr. Susan Parker reviewed data from her latest experiments in quantum medicine. Working without alien collaboration for the first time in decades, she had made discoveries that challenged fundamental assumptions about biology and healing. Her new techniques could cure diseases that had plagued multiple species for centuries, but the knowledge remained locked in human databases, inaccessible to the aliens who desperately needed it. "The Universal Vaccine Project is finally complete," she announced to her research team. "We can now prevent the red fever in any known species, including several variants that have evolved since we left Council Space." Her team celebrated the breakthrough, but the mood was subdued. They all knew that millions of aliens were dying from diseases they could cure, on worlds they could save, if only they were allowed to help. "Are we going to contact Dr. Kethmore?" asked her assistant, Dr. Jennifer Hayes. "He was your research partner for 15 years. Surely he deserves to know about this breakthrough." Susan considered the suggestion. Kethmore had been more than a research partner. He had been a friend, a colleague who had shared her passion for healing and discovery. She knew he was struggling to continue their work alone, that he lacked the creative insights that had made their collaboration so successful. "No," she said finally. "If they want our knowledge, they can ask for it properly. They can treat us as equals instead of subordinates. Until then, our research remains classified." The decision hurt, but Susan remembered the years of watching. Human contributions dismissed or ignored by alien authorities who assumed that their species' greater age made them inherently superior. If those authorities wanted human help now, they could acknowledge human worth first. On the distant world of Kepler 442b, Governor Thaxton sat in his damaged office, reading reports of the mining operation's complete collapse. The hegemony raiders had destroyed most of the orbital facilities before moving on to other targets, leaving the planet's economy in ruins and its population struggling to survive. The mining world had been prosperous for over 20 years, protected by human forces and supplied by human merchant ships. Now it was just another casualty of a galaxy-wide conflict that showed no signs of ending. Thaxton activated his personal communicator and began recording a message, knowing it would probably never be answered, but needing to try anyway. "This is Governor Thaxton of Kepler 442b, addressing any human authority who might receive this transmission. I know that my people have no right to ask for your help after the way the Council treated humanity. I know that we failed to support you when you needed us most, that we allowed our representatives to dismiss your contributions and deny your equality." He paused, looking out his window at the ruins of the mining facilities that had once been the pride of his world. "But I also know that for 20 years human soldiers died protecting my world. Human engineers helped build our cities. Human doctors treated our sick and injured. You gave us your blood, your knowledge, your lives, and we gave you nothing but ingratitude in return.